Paul, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be here.
Really great to have you. You've done a great deal of research on the effects of what you call galactic superwaves.
Yeah.
And would you say that based on your research, this is something that is just naturally occurring and has occurred for thousands and thousands of years on the Earth?
Yeah, well, it's something that affects the whole galaxy and something that goes on in every galaxy. These are explosions at the center of the galaxy, the core. And it's basically what shapes the Earth's history is geologic history, actually.
Okay.
It's something that you have to piece together, like a detective working on the evidence, like Sherlock Holmes, to find it. It's not an obvious phenomenon because it happens so seldom. You might have outbursts, large outbursts can be every 12,000 years. Although smaller outbursts could be maybe every 500, 700 years,
Okay.
but not so intense that it would be a destroying of civilizations. These type of events that would affect civilizations seriously would be maybe every 12,000 years. And when we do see these outbursts occurring in other galaxies, but there we're studying something very far away, and it's not something you can touch, and so it's very subject to people's theories about what they're seeing.
Okay. So I want to talk about some areas that you have actually verified these events, and you actually show in ice core samples found that the samples that you studied had high levels of cosmic dust. Now,
Yeah.
why is this cosmic dust significant?
Well, when I first formed the theory of the superwave theory, I said, well, if the Earth is going to be hit by a volley of cosmic rays coming from the galactic center, it would then push any cosmic dust that's outside the solar system into the solar system. In fact, it would also be able to vaporize comets that are out past the asteroid belt and cause a sort of a nebula and push this vaporized material inward. So therefore, we should see elevated amounts on the Earth at those times. And the best way to check that would be to look in the Earth's ice record. So that was a key test of the theory when I was doing my PhD. I worked on this theory for my PhD. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of, it was sort of an uphill battle because this was back in the early 80s. I got my PhD in 83. And this idea of the core affecting the Earth, the galactic core affecting the Earth, was virtually unknown. There were a few astronomers who were talking about evidence that our own galactic core had been active. Some of these I had cited, but it was not something you would find in the mainstream media or anything being talked about. So I requested a number of ice samples, which I then analyzed, and found very high levels of iridium and nickel at certain times during the last ice age. So that proved the theory was correct, because iridium and nickel are very abundant in cosmic dust. And in fact, in one sample, I also found high levels of gold. Was the first discovery of gold in polar ice. And gold is another precious metal that you find is more abundant cosmic material. I had actually one guy dropped off of my dissertation committee because I had made the discovery. He was hoping I wouldn't find it because it was so controversial to find levels as high as I was finding. We had made a deal. I had thought that he was going to stay on the committee if I got a positive result, and he ended up dropping off. And he took with him another fellow, so I had lost half of my committee.
Well, let me stop you right there. Why would they feel so threatened to drop off? Why is it so controversial? Is it the date that you found, a very 12,000 years plus, or what?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was talking about something happening virtually yesterday in terms of geologic history. Mm-hmm. The only previous type of thing at that time was Alvarez's work on the extinction of the dinosaurs, where they were talking about a comet hitting the Earth 60 million years ago, right. Causing mass extinction. Now, here I was talking about something happening as recently as, let's say, 12,000 years ago and going on through the last ice age for hundreds of thousands of years, affecting the Earth. At periodic times. So you're closer to our time now, to human civilization. And so people's emotions get in the way, and you're talking about something that's catastrophic. Mm-hmm. And science doesn't like fear. They try to avoid fear. So you'll find a lot of their theories about astronomical theories and so on, sort of paint a picture that the universe is a peaceful place. Nothing ever bad happens. Right. And that's not true if you study the past. So part of the problem was how I got the idea that I was testing for the dissertation. I had deciphered a cryptogram that apparently an ancient civilization had encoded information about these events to pass on to the future. And I think they found that was a little far out. No matter how you get the idea initially, the thing is you test the idea, you make predictions. There was something like 12 predictions that were verified coming out of my theory. Mm-hmm. The ice core work was just one verification. I also predicted that you would expect high levels of cosmic rays at certain times during the ice age. And at that time, they were just beginning to study beryllium-10 in ice cores. Beryllium-10 is an indicator of cosmic ray activity for cosmic rays hitting the Earth. And you have a whole record going back hundreds of thousands of years. And just as I predicted, you find these peaks in the beryllium-10 at certain times.
Mm-hmm. So this is interesting. Would you say that your committee was... a few members were not happy, but what was the general response from the scientific community? Did you publish this information? How was it received by others?
I've broken parts out and published parts because there were so many aspects. There's some aspects I still have yet to publish.
Okay.
Like to publish one paper could take, you're going through 4 or 5 rejections from journals. Can take years and years just to get one paper published because you're challenging the scientific thought. I did manage to get a paper published on the cosmic dust findings in a meteoritical journal. And then I had published in Earth, Moon, and Planets an article about the superwave theory, which was entirely new at that time. The whole idea that cosmic rays can actually reach us traveling 24,000 light years from the center of the galaxy, that was totally unconceived of at that time. The standard theory at that time was, okay, there are galactic core explosions, but the cosmic rays sort of get tangled up in the magnetic field of the galaxy, and they never make it out past a few hundred light years. So what I was saying is, no, they actually travel like bullets rectilinearly. The magnetic fields can't stop them because the power of the explosion is so great. It actually reorients any magnetic fields in its path. So it's like trying to stop bullets with a paper bag, you know. And they're traveling at the speed of light, essentially. So that's the thing, you can't see it coming. That's why these things are so hard to study. We see them in other galaxies, but it's not something that's an ongoing event that you can study easily. When it happens, then it's a bit too late, because then the EMP would shut down all your communication systems on the planet.
Right.
At that point.
I definitely want to talk about the effects of these superwaves, but let's talk about, this is your definition of these cosmic waves. You call them galactic superwaves. What are they, and how do they affect our planet?
Well, when you have this outburst from the center of our galaxy, from the core, it's some scientists, they call it a black hole. I don't believe in black holes. I believe it's a supermassive star that's radiating huge amounts of energy and actually generating matter inside itself. And eventually it gets, the mass gets to a point where it becomes unstable, in effect, and it's able to go into the explosive mode. It's sort of like the galactic core goes from quiescent to active. And this can happen in a matter of seconds. You've heard of gamma ray bursts?
Yes.
Yeah, it would be like a gamma ray burst that quickly. In fact, on my website, I talk about one gamma ray burst they observed in a galaxy, I don't know, billion light years away, where it went to maximum in 3 minutes. It was at very high level, like at a level what they would call quasar. And then it dropped down, and over a period of days, it gradually subsided to maybe 1/100th of what it was in the beginning. But it didn't really stop. It kept going. It was like a gamma ray burst that didn't stop. Now, I would call that a core explosion. A superwave is what they had observed, and they probably hadn't really realized it. So when this happens, the cosmic ray, they send out cosmic ray protons and electrons. The protons are 2,000 times more massive than the electrons as particles. So they end up traveling slower. And they end up, in the case of the protons, they end up decelerating. And in fact, the magnetic fields would stop them eventually. But the electrons, they stay together like a pack of horses charging out. And they're traveling close to the speed of light. And so they reach us like a pulse would reach us, pretty much at the same time as the electromagnetic waves, the gamma rays and the X-rays and so on. There's probably also a gravity wave involved, because there's what's called the electrogravitic phenomenon, that charges have gravitational correlations. So like this is through Townsend Brown's work. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
Okay. All that work went into classification about in the 50s, and it became a centerpiece of our secret space program. This is what you call UFOs, that kind of propulsion.
Ah.
Propellantless propulsion, field propulsion, there's various words for it. Anyway, Brown discovered that protons, in other words, positive charges, create gravity wells, and negative charges like electrons create gravity hills. In other words, they're antigravitic. And he was able to create gravitational forces just by charging capacitors to high voltage. So you have to take this into account in a galactic core explosion. The electrons that would be traveling out would create a gravity hill, sort of, in the galactic gravity field. And that would be a wave that would affect the Earth when it hit us. It would create a tidal effect, just like the moon and the sun do on the Earth.
Okay, so it would be a gravitational effect is what would happen.
Right. It would. It could sort of tweak the pole, try to move the Earth's pole slightly.
Okay.
I don't believe in pole reversals. In other words, actual reversal of the spin axis. If it did, it would have had to reverse exactly 180 degrees from where it is now, which I don't know.
Amazing. Yeah.
I can't say it couldn't happen for 100% certainty, but the thing is, all the stuff you read about in the myths about earthquakes, and there's the Hopi myth that talk about the Earth's pole moving from its current position. If you had like just a few degrees movement, where it was like a jerk of the pole, a sudden jerk, that would have catastrophic effects on the Earth. I mean, if suddenly the ground under your feet moved several meters in a very sharp jerk. So you don't need huge dramatic swings of the pole to have an effect.
Okay, but what would you say the most devastating effect of a galactic superwave on Earth would be? Would it be that the Earth would have its electromagnetic field shifted in such a way that it would create tsunamis, or is this more of a continual bathing of these superwaves that have a cumulative effect?
Well, you would have the cosmic ray radiation level would go up. So you have that. Then it would also affect the sun. The effect on the sun and the sun's effect on the Earth as a result is actually much worse than the superwave. And the way the sun gets affected is several ways. One is this cosmic dust that gets pushed in ends up shrouding the sun, and it ends up falling into the sun and aggravating it. The sun would then become a flare star, which, in other words, the solar flares that we see would be occurring much more frequently and much more intensely. So there would be continual solar storms that we'd be putting up with. And some of them would be strong enough to actually affect the intensity of the Earth's magnetic field. I'm the first to propose the idea that a solar proton event or extreme solar event, solar flare event, is able to reverse the polarity of the magnetic field. And the way that happens is because the solar particles from the flare, they get trapped in the Earth's magnetic field, and they end up cycling back and forth between the poles, and then they also drift equatorially, and they sort of create a huge generator effect It's like a huge current in space around the Earth, and that's called a ring current. This is all standard geomagnetic teachings. What I noticed is if you have a strong enough ring current, it will generate a field that's so strong that it can reverse the Earth's natural magnetic field. Because the ring current magnetic field is opposed to the Earth's magnetic field. And they've seen this happen on, back in 57, there was a solar event, and they saw the Earth's magnetic field intensity go down 1%. But you just take something 100 times bigger, and you get something that would actually bring it down to practically zero. At that point, your geomagnetic poles can reverse.
Okay.
And so the solar effect would be very damaging. I have one paper that talks about the mass extinction at the end of the Ice Age, where large megafauna died out. I had gone into the ice record close to the time of when they say this happened. There's a sort of a cutoff boundary there at the beginning of the Younger Dryas. And in the ice record, I found evidence of what's called a acidity spike, and that can be caused by solar particles creating acids in the atmosphere, because when these hit the atmosphere, they'll create nitric oxides and so on. And there was the biggest spike of the whole, since we've had, since the last 13,000 years, that was the biggest spike to occur right there at that time. And if you do the calculations, you see you could have gotten radiation levels that were lethal for mammals on the surface of the Earth.
Yeah. I was
people
going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
So these super waves not only carry high levels of radiation, but they may also create toxic environments, it sounds like, very toxic and deadly to any biological being, right?
Yeah, well, the nitric oxides would create ozone holes, so the ozone layer could be eliminated at the poles, maybe even down to where we are in the latitude range, allowing UV to come through, and that's lethal as far as skin cancer. It can get skin cancer from that. So if you were in cave during the event, you would be safe. And if you went out maybe at night, it would be okay.
Okay.
But large animals like elephants that weren't able to get in caves, you find that they became extinct, like the mastodons, the mammoths, and even some smaller animals you find became extinct.
So you have an article, and you have a number of articles on your website. And for those of you listening, I'm going to give the URL, the links to these websites, so you can read these papers, which are all fascinating yourself. So you mentioned that in the last 2,000 years, Earth has encountered as many as 10 less intense superwaves. Are you able were you able to record those through the ice, or how did you determine there were that many?
I made this prediction in my thesis back in '83, was when my thesis came out. There was some studies made of gas clouds near the galactic center, and they found these expanding clouds. They were different diameters, and they could tell from the rate at which the gas was expanding how old the cloud was. And my theory was that these were puffs of gas that were sort of expelled from the core during activity that was going on in the last 7,000 years. And so you were able to get dates from that. And later on, they started studying ice core and found these events. There were a lot of them line up with the dates that I had been talking about. Some Japanese scientists, they found, for example, in tree rings, a sudden sharp increase of radiocarbon lasting a few years. So these were brief events. Some cases less than a year, some cases just a few years. So those would be very minor events. They could affect climate. For example, there was one event studied by a group where it looks like it created a cold period during the summer, so that it could stunt the crops during that period.
Interesting.
So these weren't of the level where they were so bad that they would have wiped out civilization, but they would have created hardships. Now, the point is that the most recent of these small events happened about 700 years ago. So when we were in the horse and buggy days, Middle Ages, actually. Now, if something like that were to happen today, the question is, could the EMP effect be strong enough that it would wipe out all the satellites and our communication systems, power systems, create power overloads on the high tension lines worldwide? These are things that are talked about today, like the National Academy of Sciences had put out a report about how we do there is the threat of a Carrington-like event recurring. The Carrington event was a solar flare that happened about 150 years ago. And at that time, we didn't have our presently cyber technology. The best we had was like telegraph. And in fact, the event did cause spurious signals to go out on telegraph wires. It was that strong. So civilization was able to pull through that without a problem. But if that same thing happened today, it could essentially bring us to our knees. If there was no electric power, you couldn't pump gasoline, couldn't get food to the stores. That's probably why it's so important for people to have their own alternative energy systems.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about ancient history. Now, you mentioned earlier that you had discovered that some ancient civilizations were aware of these super waves. And may have been able to, I don't know if they were able to predict them. We know that the Egyptians were good astronomers. We know the Maya were, and there's other civilizations. The Chinese had some good astronomers. What did you discover in the ancient past that is a record of these super waves?
Well, it was basically what triggered my investigation to start with when I was going for my PhD work.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I want to hear this. This is great.
Sort of like an Indiana Jones story, sort of, discovering an ancient cipher, and that's what sets you off on your journey. I was actually planning to work on new physics theory that I had developed. It was a systems program that I was in. I was very interested at the time in general system theory, and was working on a physics based on a systems approach to physics. And I had discovered that the basic concepts of the physics theory that I was working on, which, based on ideas that we've just developed during the 20th century, were encoded in the tarot, in the zodiac. This is where in other words, the concepts. If you look at the zodiac signs as in a metaphoric sense, as if they were trying to pass to us some ideas, like a science, telling the story in terms of animals like Leo and Scorpio and Aquarius, where they give these personality descriptions, but really the personality descriptions are descriptions of principles occurring in the universe. What I found was that the physics theory that I have been working on was actually already known in ancient times, and they had encoded it in the zodiac out there in space. It's a theory that explains the creation of the universe, basically how did matter come into being. And right at the point in this system of symbols where it's talking about the emergence, at one point it talks about the emergence of matter and energy. Those signs are right there at the center of the galaxy. And they actually put two arrows there to point out the center of our galaxy, something that we discovered with radio telescopes. Apparently they knew where it was. How old? Well, astrology goes back thousands of years. In fact, the oldest sign that we know of that we can put a date on is Taurus. They found it in a cave in France, Lascaux, the Lascaux cave, where they found on the wall a bull painted, but they also had the constellations of the Pleiades and Hades, the star clusters. So you realize that they were really painting a star sign there.
So you're actually saying that
that was 17,000 years old,
which we don't really know where it originates. We have some rough ideas, but most science poo-poos doesn't validate astrology. And you're saying now that astrology has this information encoded in it in some way. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I believe that the main purpose was to transmit knowledge about this physics of creation, and also of the core being a center of activity. It went to great details to point out the location with the arrow indicators. There's an ancient Greek myth that says that Sagittarius is aiming his arrow at the heart of the scorpion. So when you shoot the arrow out, you look at the shaft direction and you draw a line, and you find, well, today it misses the heart of the scorpion. But then you realize that these stars, they move slowly in the sky. And if you project back, I got all this data on astrometric data that shows how fast the stars are moving in what directions and so on. So I sort of regressed all those constellations, and I found that the aim was dead on to the heart of the scorpion, Antares, on a particular date. That was 15,875 years ago. 865 years ago. And they also had put in an indication that this was an outburst that traveled out away from the core and reached the Earth. The way they did that, there was another constellation with an arrow, which sort of matches Sagittarius's arrow, but it's geometrically, if you could look at the galaxy in terms of geometry. Imagine a circle. We're at the center of the circle, Earth, and let's say the core of the galaxy is on the circumference of your circle. Now, if you take the radius of your circle and you mark it off along the circumference, that's what's called 1 radian. And right there is where you find the other arrow, Sagitta. So that's symbolic in terms of the universal language of geometry. What they're really saying is, this is the arrow that Sagittarius shot, but now it's at Earth.
Wow.
You see, because even though it's off to the side 57 degrees, 1 radian, it's really marking the distance from the core of the galaxy to you. So this is a way of telling you, okay, these arrows, these cosmic rays that are shot out, do end up making it to your planet. Not just the Earth, but all planets in the galaxy.
So would you say that this astrology that was kind of your trigger for research was brought on by just general astrology, or were you looking at like Egyptian hieroglyphs or Egyptian ruins, or was there another civilization that was like triggering your thinking that wait a minute, these ancients had more knowledge about cosmic events than we understand?
Yeah, well, I had a parallel investigation into the ancient myths and lores of Egypt and Babylonia, ancient Greece. What triggered it in the beginning was something I read in a systems book where the fellow was pointing out the Babylonian creation myth seems to have some systems-like concepts. And it called my attention to that, and that's where I realized, well, not just the tarot, but and the zodiac, but also the Babylonian creation myth have this science. And I thought, well, let me investigate Egypt. So I got a bunch of books on ancient Egyptian lore, and sure enough, the creation myth of Atum, which is the main creation myth from ancient Egypt, encodes this actually in great detail. This physics of creation. And it's very different from our modern science. It has nothing to do with a Big Bang explosion. It's talking about how matter, well, actually it begins with the idea of the ether, which is something that the modern science rejected about 100 years ago. And it's basically saying that out of the ether, you get spontaneously particles of matter can emerge. And I ended up developing this physics later. It's called Subquantum Kinetics. That it also has made like 14 predictions or so that have been verified. So it has an incredible track record also. So we were talking about the ancient lores. So this, you find it in the ancient Egyptian, ancient Greek creation myths. You find it in the myth of Osiris also. And the level of it, it's just brilliant, the way it's been encoded. I mean, you come away in awe. Whoever encoded these concepts, they were incredible minds. Ancient historians, basically, they're not trained in physics, and they're like, for example, they look at the story of the creation of the universe according to the Atum myth, where Geb and Nut, heaven and earth, separate at the dawn of creation. And they see that the ancient Egyptians were physically believing that the physical earth and physical sky separated. Now, they're missing a point entirely. That's quite a sophisticated concept that they're sort of dumbing down to a very low level, to put it that way. Anyway, all this led me to realize that this was a big deal, that they were trying to make us aware of this event. So that I had this date coming out of the zodiac. So I thought, well, maybe this could explain, what was going on during the Ice Age. And the theory I formed was that these were recurring events, and we see these happening in other galaxies. That a galaxy like ours, spiral galaxy, spends about 15% of its time with its core in the active phase, going through hell, basically. So it's like these are cyclic events. And they can be events that maybe could last just a few years, but the more of them are the long events, hundreds of years, in some cases thousands of years. Mm-hmm. There was a very long event about 41,000 years ago where the cosmic ray levels rose for thousands of years. And the sun was very active for thousands of years. You see carbon-14 levels going up like sixfold during that time. And curiously, Neanderthal man became extinct on that event. You find the Earth's magnetic field reversing for 400 years. It reversed. There was a 1,500-year period where the field intensity came down to 5% of what it is today. And then there was this reversal. And you find the extinction occurred during that reversal. It overlaps that period. And so it makes you wonder, well, maybe Neanderthal man wasn't, there was something about their culture that they weren't able to survive the event for some reason. Some people suggested that Homo sapiens were using red ochre on their skin. It was sort of like an early suntan protection, and that would have protected against UV. So there would have been a lot of UV during that period. The other thing is that perhaps humans were able to put two and two together, that when they saw these blue flashes in their eyes, they connected that, well, these are cosmic rays, and I better take shelter. And if they weren't of that level of intelligence and didn't make that connection, maybe you wouldn't take shelter and you get radiation sickness.
Do you in your research, did you find that the Egyptians, the dynastic Egyptians, Babylonians, or anyone else were able to predict these super waves or have any understanding of when they came or what their effects were, or was it something that they just had to live through?
That I can't say. There is indication of possible extraterrestrial contact with ancient civilizations. Like the Egyptians speak of a god Thoth, sort of a bird-like gods, like with a head like a stork. That the way they symbolize it, that they said came from the heavens and taught them all the sciences and ways of agriculture and so on. And all the ancient mysteries, all the myths about the creation of the universe, the creation of the earth, are attributed to Thoth. So it's possible that we were given knowledge about this and maybe helped through being warned. You read myths about God warning Noah, for example. So also there are mystics who somehow have a knowing of these things. One example, on my site, I talk about Peter Duanov, a Bulgarian mystic. Some people would consider him an avatar. He's not that well known to the rest of the world because most of his writings are in Bulgarian. They haven't been translated in English. But what I found was very interesting. He made a prediction about something that will happen in our lifetimes or in these centuries, next century. He passed away probably in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
But in his prediction, he described something just like a galactic superwave. He talked about this wave passing through space of electrical energy coming at us, towards us at an incredible speed. It's exactly as if he'd read my book. It was incredible to see this. And we hadn't even made the discoveries about, well, we were just beginning to make discoveries of Seyfert galaxies, these active galaxies that are going through core explosion phase about the time he passed away. So it's like, where did he get this knowledge? It was from the inner levels. And he believed that this would affect us also spiritually, the event. Mm-hmm. There's a question about the psychic effects on people of a huge wave of electrons passing through the solar system. Because now these are connected with a gravity potential. So you're getting a big gravity potential wave coming with these electrons. You're getting a shift, basically, of the galactic field, the galactic gravity field. And it turns out, as far as gravity potential on Earth, the galactic core's potential, it makes a bigger effect than the sun. This is maybe strange to believe, but if you do the equations, you find as far as force goes, gravitational force, the sun is stronger. But as far as gravitational potential, the galaxy is stronger. So if you suddenly are shifting the galactic field, electric field of the galaxy, this could have a psychological effect on people.
Yeah, I know that there's some people that believe that these cosmic waves may also help in our evolution.
Yes.
And I don't know I can't remember if it was the Maya or somebody that said that that when they're bathed in these cosmic rays, it has great enhancement. It acts for great enhancement. Now, I don't know. We don't have any way to measure that, unfortunately. We just are not that sophisticated. But that takes me to another question for you. It seems to me that the pre-dynastic Egyptians, that a lot of these pyramid cultures, like the Maya, like other cultures who built pyramids, had a level of science and a level of earth science that we just do not understand. And when I say earth science, it's probably not in the same understanding that you have. I'm talking about natural occurring electromagnetic frequencies that are able to tap. And I don't know if you know about the work of John Burke, who passed away a few years ago, but
No.
he was a guy who went out with magnometers and other testing equipment and actually went to Mayan pyramids. He went to Tikal, he went to the Great Pyramid of Giza, and he went to another number of earth mounds and discovered that these structures had been built on top of high movements of electromagnetic fields they're like the Chinese call them meridians. And I just was curious about your thought on what you, in your discovery, feel about the knowledge of these ancient cultures, because they seem to be much more cosmically attuned to the greater universe than we are. We're just too technical. We've kind of lost that edge. We're just like almost like automatons. We're like robots that build more machines, and there's no biological essence to them. What do you say?
Yeah, well, we developed high levels of technology, but our theories, most of what you learn in school about physics and astronomy is incorrect. The ancients did know, they were closer to the truth than we are. We sort of say, oh, well, they were just primitives. We have to start being a little self-critical about our own theories. start with the Big Bang Theory. I mean, it's easily disproved. And I wrote a paper back in 1986 that disproved the Big Bang Theory and disproved the idea of expanding universe. It was pretty much a definitive disproval. There was no way of recovery of the theory.
There were no outs.
But it's sort of like the dead body got up and it started walking again, you know, and it's as if nothing ever happened. So this is the kind of thing that shows how far away from the truth, from the reality we are. Even the idea of energy conservation, the idea that it's not possible to create energy out of nothing. Well, that is happening every day continually. Most of the stars in the galaxy, in the universe, are generating energy inside spontaneously. They're not burning. They're actually creating matter and energy inside. And I wrote several papers. Now, these were published in scientific journals, which means they passed review. So if there was something wrong with what I was saying, it would have been pointed out, would never have been published. But it was published. The reason why you don't hear this being taught is because it contradicts the current views. And so what they do is they ignore the finding. You know.
Fascinating. Yeah. You have spoken around the world at different ancient sites, and I viewed a video of you speaking about the Bosnian pyramids.
Yeah.
And there's a tremendous amount of controversy on that pyramid simply because it isn't a standard pyramid in the sense that it was engineered with massive stone blocks. Since I'd say in the last, I want to say 8 to 9 years, we've had a number of other discoveries around the world of these hills that are formed into pyramids. We see it in Java, Indonesia, at the Kanun Penang pyramid, which is dated approximately 20 plus thousand years ago, and they're not even finished excavating it yet, so it could be significantly older. But I'm curious about your thinking on those complexes, and there's so much European science on it. The Western science, especially in the United States, tends to discount this research, but there's apparently some energetic force that's coming through. What's your feeling on the Bosnian pyramid?
Yeah, I was there 2 years ago, took part in their conference and tour. And the contribution that I made, the lecture I gave, I was giving a suggestion of, first of all, why you don't see it as a stone pyramid, and it's today covered with dirt, which led a lot of people to think it was just a mountain they were looking at.
Right.
And the thing is that this is located just maybe 500 kilometers south of where the ice sheet was. And at the end of the Ice Age, the ice was melting and forming lakes of water on its surface, especially during times when the sun was very active. In fact, you read about it in the myths. In Earth Under Fire, I have whole bunch of conflagration myths from all over the world about how the sun burned the earth. So these were, not just tall stories. If you understand about what happens when you get an extreme solar event, this is exactly what would happen. And it would tend to melt the ice on the surface of the ice sheet, forming these lakes, which if they discharged, like if you get a dam break on one lake, now remember the ice sheet, it's about as high as 3 kilometers at the center and about 1,500 kilometers from the center to the edge. So imagine a wave of water starts near the top and starts triggering other lakes to empty. And it keeps growing and growing and going faster and faster. By the time it reaches the edge of the ice sheet, it's going several hundred miles per hour, and it could be half a mile high, and it could be 1,000 miles long, and just sweeps outward from the edge of the ice sheet. Anything in its path would be pulverized, like trees be pulverized. It would consist of a wave of water and ice and rock. And I've studied the area there in Bosnia, also in Greece. I've done a lot of investigations of Greece. And you see all this evidence of flood deposits at very high altitudes in the mountains. The only way it could have been dumped there is by a wave of water from the ice sheet. And so I believe these waves, I call them glacier waves, or continental glacier waves. It's a new concept and hadn't been proposed before. I'm the first to propose the idea in my dissertation. I propose about these waves, and I have yet to publish it because I had concentrated in publishing these other papers, right. And it's been on back burner. And this is my next point of order because I think it's a very important theory. It explains so much in geology. It explains, for example, the mammoths being found frozen in Alaska and Siberia. You find them frozen in what looks like flood deposits. The heavy parts settled first, like the rocks and the bones, and the lighter parts, like the fleshy parts of the elephants or animals, floated more towards the top. This is what's called catastrophic depositions, when you have a catastrophic wave. In Alaska, you find silt deposits as high as 1,500 meters above sea level. How did they get there? You know, one geologist proposed, well, maybe there was an ice jam that blocked, sort of created a lake in Alaska, in inland Alaska, and it created these deposits. The lake was there for hundreds of years and created these silt deposits on these mountains and formed it that way. But to do that, the ice jam would have had to have been about 500 kilometers long to have made a barrier that long. It's just an impossibility. The obvious explanation is it was a wave of water that was coming off the ice sheet, and that's what caused these deposits to be at those levels. And you find it not just in Alaska and Siberia, but in Bosnia, in Greece, and all through
Let me
Europe.
ask you, Paul, real quickly. When you talk about a glacier ice sheet, which basically you're describing a tsunami that hits and is created, is it something that is immediate? So something out of the sky hits these things, or is it like slow melting and then there's a dam and the dam breaks, causing the tsunami?
Okay. So the ice sheet, I know you've seen maps of the Earth covered with the ice, right? What it was like during the Ice Age. Those gradually formed over many hundreds of years, thousands of years. The ice built up. But there are times when the ice melted very rapidly, and that's when you were in danger of getting these glacier waves coming from the surface of the sheet. Preferably during times of solar warming. We find that even during the Ice Age, there was times when the Earth's climate warmed abruptly. In fact, one warming occurred at the time of this mass extinction we were talking about, that you find evidence of a solar event occurring at that time. So just like in the myths about the sun burning the earth, you find that geology validates this. Um, but it's just basically it's just water coming off of an ice sheet at a high altitude. It's like an avalanche. Think of an avalanche, but instead of snow, it's ice mixed with meltwater moving forward like an avalanche would, but faster, and pulverizing anything in its wake. Now, in Greece, I've studied lignite deposits in Megalopolis and several other lignite mines in Greece. And these are always found in the valleys, in valleys that are ringed with mountains. And my theory is that these glacier waves of water, as they were moving southward from the ice sheet, they were pulverizing the pine trees and the deciduous trees into little pieces and ended up depositing that. By the way, these trees were carbonized. They turned black. Why? Because this happened during a solar event. If you get extreme solar event with cosmic ray electrons from the sun hitting the Earth, creates electron shower that would carbonize trees just standing there.
Wow.
So it doesn't take millions of years to form this coal. This happened overnight, basically. And then it was immediately shredded and buried by these waves. And these basins are where you had mountains ringing the basin would have been like settling pools where this stuff could end up calmly form a layer of coal, of lignite. And if you study these, you see evidence of catastrophic burial. It's not like the standard theory that these were ferns growing over millions of years and dying and forming a bog. No, that's baloney. This is evidence of the Great Flood, what we call the Great Flood. There were scientists and geologists giving flood explanations for geologic features back in the 1800s. And then they were sort of sidelined by and the geologic community went in a different direction. They somehow felt these people were too religious and they should bring cold calculating science to replace it. And so they replaced those theories with slow-moving glaciers causing everything. But actually, the flood theorists like Howarth, people like that, they were closer to the truth.
Wow.
And I think there probably was, in this case, some cooperation of where they were trying to predict the arrival of these glacier waves. They probably had sighting posts with a signaling system. So when they saw one coming, they would signal people so they would be prepared. You see a lot of myths about them making arks and boats and stocking provisions, just from all over the world. I just have put a lot of myths in my book about the flood myths. And you find great similarities from one part of the world to the other.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question, and this is an article I found on your website. I believe it was in the etheric.com. Yes, it was an etheric.com website on the Sphinx. You basically validate Dr. Robert Schoch and John Anthony West's estimation that the age of the Sphinx is older than well, they want it to be 2,500, but Schoch believes it's about 5,000 to 7,000 years old. John Anthony West has said many times, I've had him on the program, he says it's older than that. But you do something quite interesting. You say, and you use the polar precessions, and you feel that the Sphinx was perhaps built around 10,500 BC or 13,000 years ago. And
I think 9,000 BC, I was
oh,
saying.
9,000 BC. Okay,
11,000 years ago. Yeah.
but the thing is, though, if that's the case, that would be that means that the Sphinx was built post catastrophic event. Wouldn't it be kind of a
Exactly.
memorial to
Right.
this?
Uh, in fact, now 11,600 years ago is the date that Plato gives for the sinking of Atlantis and the flood.
Okay.
I discussed this in my book also, that it's the whole Atlantis myth is a metaphor. People have to realize this. The sinking of Atlantis is the disappearance of the ice sheet. Atlantis was the ice sheet. It's militant attacks on the surroundings were these glacier waves. And it talks about a shoal of mud being left. This exactly describes the aftermath of the ice age, of the disappearance of the ice sheets. Um, and So I lost the trend.
Yeah, the effects, the age of the Sphinx, and you
Oh,
were
yeah.
saying that it relates to
Yeah.
yeah.
So if you study this period, there was what appears to have been another solar event right immediately prior to that flooding event. There's evidence in the ice record of more acidity spikes. And I believe that that was what was involved in the termination of the ice age. The final termination involved a very rapid warming. It was solar triggered. It was due to the sun becoming very active at that time. And you find high levels of cosmic rays during that period, but they tended to settle down by 9,000, a little earlier, 9,200 BC. The cosmic rays were back down to almost normal levels. And it would have made an ideal time for people to get out and build big monuments like that. And the way I discovered it was if you look at the zodiac, the sign of Leo is just like the Sphinx. It's like a lion crouching with its legs out. And in the ancient Egyptian mythology, they have what's called the Aker Sphinx, which is just like that. It's the gate from which the sun is supposed to emerge at dawn, coming from the underworld to the day world. And the sun comes through the breast of the Aker, of this lion-like beast. And it is basically put there out in the sky as Leo, and it's straddling the ecliptic. And right there, where the breast of the Sphinx is, that's where it happens to be Regal, the brightest star in the constellation of Leo. It's one of the four gate stars. You know, like the zodiac there's four signs of the zodiac that form the Sphinx. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And they each have a royal star associated with them. Now, the star for Leo, it is considered the lead star of all the royal stars. And it's located actually the closest to the ecliptic of all those royal stars. And it's sort of symbolizing this emergence of the sun from the night world to the day world. And if you look, what does that mark in terms of the precession calendar? In other words, where was the vernal equinox at that time? The vernal equinox was passing over that point about 9,000 BC. So it's almost like they were trying to use it as a date marker. You know, it's actually the closest marker to the ecliptic. Mm-hmm. And I believe that they were symbolizing this as trying to express the idea that the dark period of the Ice Age had finished, and we have now come into a sunny period, so to speak.
That's interesting. So you think the Sphinx is actually a kind of a marker in a way of
The end
coming
of
out of a doom and gloom situation.
Exactly. Plus, ancient Egyptologists speak about that whole complex, that it's actually a memorial site for some event of the past where there was loss of life, great loss of life. I believe that the pyramid and the Sphinx, that's all part of recognizing what humanity went through and that they survived.
Wow. Any quick thoughts on who may have built the Sphinx? If it's pre-dynastic, pre-Egyptian, or is it? What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's before the rise of the Egyptian Empire was around 6,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So here we're 5,000 years earlier than that.
Yeah.
You're closer to what's it called?
Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah. Of course, the Bosnian pyramid's 34,000 years old from a radiocarbon date they've come up with.
We'll have to have you come back and talk about pyramid cultures, because I am completely fascinated by them, and I think you are too. Hey, listen, in the final moments we have in the program, I want to ask you about these galactic superwaves, because that's what you're so attuned to. And you mentioned on your website that we're due for another one of these galactic superwaves. When do you think they're coming our way, and how do we prepare, or can we prepare?
Yeah. Well, you can't see them coming, so it's better to be prepared. As far as what would I do, I probably wouldn't do anything different than I'm already doing. I believe that life goes on after death. So, this is all interesting. It would be interesting to watch a superwave happen. But I'm not thinking that that's the end of existence for me spiritually. People go on. Well, you hear about underground tunnels having been dug. Governments know about this. They've been in contact with ETs who probably tell them something is coming. You better make some preparations. It's interesting, like the Super Collider tunnel. Once it was dug, suddenly they canceled the program. And now you find out, you hear from rumors of people in that area that it's all outfitted, sort of like a prison facility would be outfitted with cafeterias, sleeping quarters, and everything, sort of like an underground shelter. And you hear about a lot of other examples, like in Colorado, supposedly there's underground quarters near Denver Airport, or in the Denver Airport area, which would be used for the U.S. government in the event of some catastrophe. You hear about in Norway, they built tunnels for preserving seeds and plants for the future. And you hear from people that are fairly high placed that they've been told that this is a place that they would go in the event of a catastrophe. So there are these plans that have been made for some people. Now the rest, I guess they figure they can't help everyone. Keep in mind that if you see blue flashes in your eyes, these are caused by cosmic rays. They've been reported by the astronauts when they're getting close to the Van Allen belts. They see these flashes. So those are sort of like your own personal Geiger counter. So best is to take shelter behind concrete or something that would keep you safe.
Well, that would be a short-term super wave, but if there's a long-term, I think we have to
Yeah,
just cross
yeah.
our fingers and
You have to figure the future will be horse and buggy and growing your own crops and stay away
yeah,
from populated areas, which could go into chaos.
yeah, interesting, fascinating.
I did
I
get one.
really,
There was one guy who left a
mhm.
posting. I don't know if there's any truth to this. He believes November 1st of this year we'll see something. Uh, I just thought I'd throw that in. I don't necessarily would put too much faith, but that was his experience. He had a profound experience that led him to believe that. There's also the Garabandal, the Fatima prophecy. One of the young ladies was given the day, which she hasn't released yet. She's been told to keep it quiet until right before. And so we can only speculate about what that date was. I'd come up with a date, I don't know, 2022 or something. I forget. I discussed it on my website.
Okay. So you have actually come up with some potential dates, and other people are talking about potential dates that for some kind of an event like this.
Yeah, all I can say is we're overdue for another event. Whether it will be a small event that will be like similar to something that happened 700 years ago, or a very prolonged event that would be very trying, I can't say. But, things have been too quiet, the Galactic Center, the last hundreds of years. And some things do. We were worried there when something was coming in. There was this G2 star making a close pass. And so we were watching things very carefully. You'll see a lot of postings about that on my website.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like that passed without any major thing happening. But even the astronomical community was really, you had so many astronomers watching the galactic core during that period. They were actually hoping to see fireworks. And I was saying, well, if they really knew what those fireworks would do, they wouldn't wish so strongly.
That's interesting. It's been fascinating, Dr. Paul LaViolette. Your website, the one that I found, had really wonderful material. And those of you who are listening, I would suggest strongly that you go here to this website. It's www.etheric.com. That's ETHERIC.com. Great articles, great references, years of research, years of disclosure, and even some great references.
And
And then,
mention the other one too, the
yeah, the
Starburst
other one
Found.
is the starburstfound.org and www.starburstfound.org, and it has a lot of, I guess it has a lot of your papers, doesn't it, Paul?
Yeah, both sites have my papers, but I guess they're organized a little better there on the Starburst site.
Yeah, actually, he has. You can see his actual scientific papers with all his graphs and samples and everything, beautifully laid out, and you can actually download them because most of them are formatted in PDF format for easy download and viewing. So, fantastic. So, hey, Paul, are you going to be writing anything new in the near future? You got anything coming up? I'd love to talk to people about that.
Well, I'm working on a space propulsion project now, and
Hmm.
we have a big test coming up. If that works, it will change society, change man's mode of travel. So we'll see how that turns out.
We'll have you back on the program again and talk a little bit about that and about some of your other work. Paul, it's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed your insight.
Thank you. Thank you, Cliff.